You should be drafting Lamar Jackson over Patrick Mahomes in the 4th round. Vinny and I both agree on that, but we're on the opposite ends when it comes to Josh Allen versus Jalen Hurts in the 3rd round. It's time to debate tough quarterback draft decisions on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody. Thank you so much for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. When I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with the NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. No, I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com. Check out all our preseason good stuff there to get you ready for your fantasy drafts.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. All right, so we've gone through all the toughest decisions while you go through your drafts on the running backs and on the wide receivers over the last 2 days. Now we're going to hit on the tough quarterback decisions that you're going to have to make in the next few weeks here when you are drafting your fantasy teams, starting right off at the top. Say you want to draft one of the top quarterbacks to just say, I'm plugging in this guy every week. I don't want to have to worry about it. I want an elite guy. You have Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen going 1 and 2 in drafts. Normally early 3rd round. I guess sometimes maybe people will reach on them in the late 2nd round, but you should be able to get them in the early 3rd round. Which way are you leaning here towards Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen?
Yeah, Josh Allen is the easy pick for me. I mean, I wouldn't say it's easy, but I feel more comfortable with it overall. With Jalen Hurts, I don't know if we're going to see as much as that little tush push, the Philly center pushing him into the end zone with Jason Kelce now retired. Maybe they'll retire that play a little bit, and maybe they want to be careful with putting more abuse on his body here because overall, we know the Eagles' offense wasn't very good last year. There were key moments where it let them down in the second half. And with Kellen Moore, they might make some adjustments here where they're not going to necessarily force Jalen Hurts into rushing situations. So I think his rushing is going to come down a little bit, not just his scoring, but just his opportunities. They will need to start preserving his body because he's taken a lot of hits. I know he's a big, strong dude who can bench press or whatever, 500 pounds or whatever the exaggerated total is. But again, he's going to take some hits. He's getting older, and we know the offensive line is not going to be as steady here. Maybe some changes that we have to worry about away from Jordan Mailata. So Lane Johnson's also getting a little older. So when I look at that, I mean, I think Jalen Hurts is going to have to use his shorter passing game a little bit more. You have Saquon Barkley now in the mix, and that can be a way as an outlet to get him going. Now, the passing game is fine. I think as a passer, he's going to be totally fine because he's got A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, and some guys he can stretch the field with. But again, I think that rushing total is probably going to diminish here for Hurts, where I think it's going to stay up here for Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen has a sense of freedom as well without Stephon Diggs. That's been the reports out of the camp where he doesn't have to force the ball to Diggs. He can spread it around, see the field, see what's opening up. And, of course, he's going to be a big monster in the red zone with his rushing ability. So I think that last part, a little bit of separation here, and that's why I'm going with that one.
So I'm on the opposite side. I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts. He just feels safer to me. If I'm going to take a quarterback this early, I want a guy, that's going to score at the top of the position, obviously, right? He needs to outscore everybody else. And that's what Hurts and Allen both do. But I also don't want to take the risk on Allen losing his top 2 wide receivers and then also his OC changing and being like, to Joe Brady, who I just don't have as much confidence in as I do with Kellen Moore. Like I like the change at OC for Hurts. I don't like the change for Josh Allen, but also just looking at last year, both had 9 weeks as a top 5 fantasy quarterback. Hurts had 8 weeks as a top 4 fantasy quarterback. Allen had just 6, but also looking at the last 2 seasons here with 25 plus point games. I was actually shocked that Jalen Hurts has more games of 25 or more fantasy points because I felt like Allen was more of that like huge boom game guy. But it's Hurts that actually has the most among quarterbacks at 13 games with over 25 fantasy points. Allen's second among quarterbacks at 11. But I was shocked by that. And then also, like we brought up, like Allen lost his weapons. Hurts has not. And I'm just way more confident in Kellen Moore than Joe Brady. So I'm leaning away from taking Josh Allen that early, but I'm still comfortable with taking Jalen Hurts. I think his rushing touchdowns will be there.
Yeah, I think Josh Allen. I mean, I don't think there's any question that these are 1-2, right? In your mind, it's
Yeah.
just your preferences here. And then the one other thing I'll point out here with Josh Allen versus Jalen Hurts. Now, it really could come down to the rushing touchdowns, and that could be the simple difference here. And that's a little bit of a variable we can't predict, right? I mean, last year was off the charts. Obviously, they both were, I think, trading touchdowns all year long. So that's something we just have to consider. Where again, we can't always predict that. So go with the other factors, maybe to your level of comfort when you're making this decision. Now, Michelle, this is another one I think that we actually agree on here pretty easily. Two-time MVP Lamar Jackson, two-time MVP Patrick Mahomes. They're going into the late third, so a little bit after Hurts and Allen, early fourth round. I think we kind of have hinted to our loyal listeners where we both stand here, but I'll let you go here on Pat versus Lamar.
It's Lamar Jackson. I mean, both are really great quarterbacks, right? And Mahomes is obviously the better overall quarterback, but that doesn't matter for fantasy. And they both showed throughout their career they can be elite fantasy options, sure, but we haven't seen a year like Mahomes had last year for Lamar. Like Lamar does not have that floor because of his rushing. Like that's never going to happen to Lamar that he ends as the quarterback 12 in points per game and even further than that overall because Lamar is so that he's going to always have 750, 800, 1,000 rushing yards. And it's not even like you have to depend too much on those rushing touchdowns. He's not like killer in those, but he will throw plenty of touchdowns to make up for that. But Mahomes last year, like he showed you, he does have a floor because he is mobile, but he's not going to put up even half of the rushing yards that Lamar does. And he finished as, like I brought up, the quarterback 12 in points per game. Mahomes did 11 weekly finishes outside the top 10, including 8 weeks. He was the quarterback 15 or worse. And it's not like too much is changing. Yeah, they added Xavier Worthy, a rookie. We'll see if that changes stuff. Hollywood Brown's already hurt. Rashee Rice, who knows if he's going to be suspended, but like he had him last year. Travis Kelce's getting older. I just don't see too much changing for him. I don't think it's going to be as bad as last year, but Lamar's so incredibly safe. I'm just taking him. I think last year's pretty much his floor. He was quarterback 3 in points per game. And like it was an up and down season because his running back stole all the touchdowns for the majority of the beginning of the year. But like even if Derrick Henry scores 12 to 14, that's still way less than what the running back stole from him last year, which was 20 rushing touchdowns the Ravens running backs had.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson should have a few more touchdowns on the ground. I'm also siding with Lamar on this one. And Patrick Mahomes, I think what's going on here is the Chiefs have become too good. They're just too good of a team where Patrick Mahomes is not having to throw 50 times a game to help them win. In the regular season, they're also going to load manage him a little bit, right? In terms of how much volume and hits they want him to take, running out of the pocket and doing all that. Because the big thing here is this team is playing 20 games basically every season now. So they got to preserve him for the best. And that's what we saw, right? If we could put that in a bottle, his fantasy production in the playoffs, then we could be fine with that. But Mahomes has realized that. He doesn't need to prove anything else as an elite quarterback. He's going to the Hall of Fame already. So he's got the rings. I mean, he's just worried about the rings right now, right? He doesn't care how they get there. He doesn't care if Isaiah Pacheco scores 10 touchdowns or he has 5 deep balls that are pretty, right? He's just going to do whatever it takes to win. And that's what makes him a very good reality quarterback, but sometimes can make him underwhelming in fantasy, where Lamar has to pretty much carry his team. I mean, Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews now, and that's why he's the MVP, right? He had to do a lot of things. I think Derrick Henry could steal touchdowns, but again, Gus Edwards scored a bunch of touchdowns last year, and Jackson was fine. So I'm fine with Jackson all the way here over Mahomes. And again, Mahomes might be even rich there at that value. We're going to talk about some guys that actually might have some better values that you can target in our second segment.
Yeah, we're actually going to jump down to the 7th round with when you're going to decide on your next quarterback, because we're off those guys in the 5th, 6th round. We don't want to take CJ Stroud or Joe Burrow or Anthony Richardson at that cost. There's guys later on. So we're saying skip those rounds altogether. There's no reason to even debate about those. We're going to jump down to the 7th round and debate about Dak Prescott versus Jordan Love coming up next. I have a feeling we're going to be on differing sides here. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and the best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. I've used this app so many times. Whenever I need to buy tickets for any of the NFL games or MLB games or whatever I'm looking for, I jump on this app, and I know they always have my back. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So you're sitting in the 7th round here, and you have to choose between Dak Prescott or Jordan Love. We're going to say Kyler Murray went ahead of you. You got sniped, right? Because that would be my choice. Kyler Murray easily right here. But I get sniped right ahead of me, right before I get to pick. The person in front of me takes Kyler Murray, and I'm sad. So I'm like, okay, I like Dak Prescott a lot. Do I take him? Maybe I take Jordan Love. Which side are you going with?
Yeah, I know we're going to disagree on this one because you had Jordan Love as someone that you said might be overrated, might be not a good value pick here, but I think Jordan Love is a great value pick. I mean, look at that preseason stint, if you want to call it. It wasn't really a start; it was kind of a series, but he comes out there just shucking balls downfield, and he's like, "I'm
Do
done.
I have to
I'm done
remind
for
you
the
what
Lions."
Kenny Pickett did in the preseason last year?
Yeah, but Kenny Pickett also was not a top fantasy QB the way that
I
Jordan
get
Love
it. I
was
get it.
last
It's
year.
totally different.
Yeah. And also Jordan Love, it's not just he beat Dak Prescott head to head in the playoffs. I mean, that is probably still bitter for Cowboys fans. But when you look at Jordan Love, this guy is in an amazing system right now. I mean, the system that Matt LaFleur has is pretty fantastic. When I see Sean Clifford going out there and looking decent, it just tells you that he's just superior at coaching, and maybe he should got a little bit more credit for those Aaron Rodgers late career MVPs. He's just a very good coach. The receivers are all getting rave reviews here in training camp, all of them. The tight ends, the receivers, along with the Jaden Reed, everyone is looking good in this offense. And I don't know if the Packers are going to be as run effective as you think with Josh Jacobs. I think they're going to try to get Marshawn Lloyd in the field and get some receptions there as well. So another weapon that they can look at to be more dangerous. Now, I get it. Jordan Love took a slow build, and it was a lot of the touchdowns. But I think that you look at his play, and this is just an ascending player, and that's where I'm going to go. Like, he's a player that has league MVP potential. I will just say that in the future because, again, it's a system. It's where Rodgers won MVPs. He's going to put up numbers, and I think 30 touchdowns is well within reach again. I don't think he's going to be totally void here in the rushing attack either. He's going to have some chances there as well. So Jordan Love is kind of that budding Mahomes type where he's got what it takes to help his team win. It's going to be making plays wherever he needs to, and I think that's going to add up to fantasy value. So again, ascending player. I love what Dak did last year, and it's a tough decision. I'm just going to be honest with you. That's why we're breaking it down. But I love Jordan Love a little bit more. Now Michelle can explain why she hates Jordan Love.
It's not even so much I hate Jordan Love. I think he'll be a fine quarterback. I just, especially for fantasy. I mean, I brought up on my bus show, like, you couldn't have asked for a better stretch down the second half of the year. Like, you cannot get better than 20 touchdowns to 1 interception ratio and what he was doing during that stretch. It was amazing, right? And still, he finished as a quarterback 11-7, 21, 11, and 8 in 5 of those games from weeks 11 through 18. Also, throughout the season, Love had just 2 top 4 quarterback finishes all season long. Prescott had 7. Prescott destroyed all of the other quarterbacks in fantasy points per game from week 6 through 18. Quarterback won by far. And then just like on the season, he was still quarterback 4 in points per game. I know Jordan Love finished high too at like quarterback 6 points per game, but it's different when you look at the points per game because Dak's over 20 fantasy points per game. Jordan Love was at 18, along with many other quarterbacks like Kirk Cousins and Brock Purdy and CJ Stroud and Kyler Murray. Like, you can find those quarterbacks that can get you 18 points per game. Finding the quarterbacks that can get you 20 plus, that's the hard part, right? And Dak Prescott has done it many years. He's been a top 4 quarterback in fantasy points per game in 3 of the last 5 seasons. Yes, obviously they need to sign CeeDee Lamb. If that doesn't happen, something goes wrong, he sits out for whatever reason, then yeah, I mean, I'm off Dak. He needs CeeDee Lamb out there. But he still has Mike McCarthy. Nothing's changing in this offense, really. They've replaced their offensive line a bit. Maybe that suffers, but it seems like they're actually looking pretty good so far in the offseason. They still don't have a running back to lean on. Like, this is Dak Prescott's offense. It's just a no-brainer to me to not risk taking Jordan Love and hoping he's even more efficient because he was hyper efficient last year. Like, I'm just going to take Dak, who we've seen do it year after year after year.
Yeah, it's very close to me. Again, I think I just like Jordan Love, the trajectory he's on. I mean, Dak is pretty much on a nice plateau here. There's no doubt about it. And it's a very favorable fantasy spot to have. But I think Jordan Love, again, there's something about his upside here that I can't quit, Michelle. That's just the bottom line. And maybe I'm more in love with Love in reality, and it's crossing over into fantasy. But I still think these two guys, the bottom line is these two and Kyler Murray are really good values here in the 7th round over some of those guys that you could get just before. Now, this is a very tough one, Michelle. I am very torn on this, so I'll let you go first on this. Brock Purdy and Caleb Williams. Jaden Daniels, I don't think is going to be a decision because he's going to keep going up. Everyone's going to get buzzy about him. He's going to be the Anthony Richardson pick we want to take a few rounds later. But Brock Purdy, Caleb Williams, these guys are right there at the bottom of QB1, like 11, 12 there. Where do you stand on this one? I mean, I'm excited about both of these players. I'll say that right away.
Yeah, it's important you bring up the Jaden Daniels thing because right now his ADP is going right around Brock Purdy and Caleb Williams. I'm taking Jaden Daniels if he still is there by the time I'm drafting.
Yeah.
But like you said, the more preseason happens, if he keeps making big plays, his ADP is going to keep rising. So if we're just looking at the 9th round, Brock Purdy versus Caleb Williams, I'm going to lean Caleb Williams because they're both in stacked offenses. They're both good. And I know Caleb Williams is more dynamic. He can make crazier throws. But we've already seen Brock Purdy do it. Like, he had 8 games with 20-plus fantasy points last year. That was the same amount as Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott, only behind Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. And he just has too good of an offense, too good of a system. He only threw 444 pass attempts. That cannot go down. It can only increase. They spent a first-round pick on our wide receiver, Ricky Pearsall, so you do expect them to throw more this year. Christian McCaffrey's already hurt. It seems like Brandon Ayuk is staying there. Who in the world knows? Maybe I lean towards the Caleb Williams side if Brandon Ayuk does get traded. But if Ayuk's there, I'm still going to stick with Brock Purdy.
Yeah, this one is killing me. Like, I stayed up at night thinking about it, kind of literally here. So when I look at Brock Purdy, I love Brock Purdy, but Caleb Williams, the ceiling on this guy is pretty high. And I know Brock Purdy hit a pretty high ceiling last year as well with the big plays, but it's very hard to duplicate exactly those numbers, right? His yards per attempt and some of these things were just off the charts fantastic that we hadn't seen really in the league. And I think he's going to be a deep passer, but I think Caleb Williams, they're just going to let this guy loose all over the field. And I think you have to consider the weaponry here. I know the 49ers obviously are loaded with weapons, but if you start looking around on the Bears, I mean, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze, Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, DeAndre Swift, these are all valuable playmakers, right? I mean, he's going to spread the ball around to all these guys. So individually, we've been down on DJ Moore. We're worried about Roma Dunze. Keenan Allen's a little bit older. Cole Kmet's value has been adjusted, but who's tying this all together that's getting all these guys numbers that cut into each other? It's Caleb Williams. And I just saw him and I'm like, this guy's ready. And I looked at his resume there at USC. I mean, this guy would just find ways to make plays to score. And again, they have Swift. Swift is not the best red zone runner. So they're going to use Williams a little bit to run balls in. He may not have a lot of rushing yards, but I could easily see him clear 30 touchdowns total. I think it happens. The schedule's favorable. You're going to have I think you're going to have a lot of sneaky shootouts in the NFC North too. So I do like Caleb Williams. I think the ceiling's great. If you're going for very high floor, and if you want to draft that way, Brock Purdy's great. But if you're a little riskier and you didn't get Jaden Daniels and you want some of that rookie action, jump on Caleb Williams because I think he's going to have a big year as well. So I can't wait. I can't wait for Williams and Daniels to go at it. They're both going to be great fantasy assets. One of them is going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Ooh, love to hear that. Now, in our final segment, we're going to get into some of the deeper quarterbacks being taken. Your boy Trevor Lawrence versus Justin Herbert, who was on the top of the
Who's your
world
boy?
to start his career for fantasy and has just fallen off the last couple of years. Are we going to get back on the train or jump over to Trevor Lawrence? We'll get into that in our final segment.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for a small business, you want to find qualified professionals that are right for the role. These are also the quality guys that you and gals you want to add to your team. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but may be open to the perfect role in a new organization. In a given month, more than 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you are looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within just 24 hours in one day. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier for employers as well. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job description, making the process even quicker and faster. 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Why aren't you one of them? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Michelle, let's close the show talking about some guys that disappointed us last year. We talked them up. Now they've really fallen down the draft boards. I guess people don't like what they did last year to the point where these guys got paid too. These are two of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league with Joe Burrow buried down in the 11th round of fantasy drafts. Trevor Lawrence versus Justin Herbert. I really pumped up Lawrence last year. He disappointed. You pumped up Herbert a little bit last year. He disappointed. So where do we stand now on these guys in their post-hype sleeper mode or post-hype keep sleeping on mode?
I think you might, if you're deciding between these two, I think it might have to be Trevor Lawrence, which I think might surprise you because I've been the Trevor Lawrence hater. But the Justin Herbert injury is what finally kind of knocks me off, right? I already wasn't high on him prior to him getting injured with the new OC and Greg Roman that's run heavy, with him losing Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Austin Eckler and Gerald Everett, all of his top 4 targets. Like, that's not going to be easy for any quarterback. And he's been pretty bad for fantasy the last 2 years. Quarterback 11 in 2023, quarterback 17 in 2022, after being the quarterback 2 in 2021. But listen, I just think that injury, that foot injury, just takes it to where he can't really be trusted because he might start slow. The one thing we were excited about with Greg Roman is maybe Justin Herbert runs more, right? But now with the foot injury, will that happen? And we did see Trevor Lawrence finally start to come along before his injury, like finishes quarterback 1, quarterback 7, quarterback 5, and then injures his ankle in the fourth quarter of week 13. And then it goes way downhill. He starts throwing a ton of interceptions. He's playing terribly because not only was it the ankle sprain, but then it was concussion protocol. And then it was an AC joint sprain, like a terrible end to the season for him. Travis Etienne was stealing so many touchdowns from him to start the year. It finally started to go his way. Then he got injured. So if I'm taking a chance on one, it'll be Trevor Lawrence. And I just hope with his new weapons, he can actually throw 30 touchdowns this year.
Yeah, I'm also taking Trevor Lawrence. And the one thing that you have to keep in mind with this guy, he's a gamer, right? He probably played hurt a lot of the times he probably shouldn't have last year. And that obviously hurt his production because he wasn't as effective moving around and throwing and getting the ball downfield. Now, they were disappointed, definitely, with the Calvin Ridley situation. They thought that was going to be a special connection. It looked great in week 1, but then it didn't look great the rest of the season. Then he did have Christian Kirk in the back end of the year. And Zay Jones was also hurt, and he was a key guy to unlocking some of the rest of the offense. But now they kind of replenished that with Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie first-round pick. They have Gabe Davis. They even have another playmaker sneakily on the roster, Devin Duvernay, a guy that they can put out on the field at times when they stretch the field to make big plays. So clearly the emphasis was on adding some speed, some downfield threats, stretching the field a little bit more consistently than they were able to do with Calvin Ridley. So that's good for Trevor Lawrence. Having Kirk healthy is great. Evan Ingram, don't forget about him. He was a key target last year, and I think all these guys together are going to help Trevor Lawrence put up some really nice numbers. And you're right, Travis Etienne is not going to score at the same rate. There's going to be some touchdowns to go to Lawrence. Also, Lawrence had some regression with his rushing production. I think he'll have a few more touchdowns there, as well as his yardage. So all signs point to a rebound season for Trevor Lawrence. Now, is it necessarily going to be top 12? No, probably not. Probably maybe top 15 at the best case scenario here. But Justin Herbert, there's just no interest in him right now because, again, the plantar fascia is a very tough injury to rebound from. And if they're going to expect him to run or be mobile a little bit more in Greg Roman's offense, that's not great. Ladd McConkey has been a little bit banged up as well. So, again, I think this is going to be the Jim Harbaugh image of a team. And they've only really had, when you look at Greg Roman, going back to Colin Kaepernick and going forward to Lamar Jackson, those are the types of quarterbacks that have put up numbers in the Greg Roman offense, and even a little bit Tyrod Taylor. But when you look at this situation, Jim Harbaugh is kind of not the best for fantasy quarterbacks. He kind of did this to Alex Smith, right? I don't think Justin Herbert's going to turn into Alex Smith, not much of a touchdown passer. But the key is he has also been not as good since his rookie year. I think he needed somebody to kind of fix him. Less volume, playing off the rushing attack. And yeah, this screams defense and running game team as much as possible to try to win games here in 2024 as they make the transition with Harbaugh.
Yeah, I don't know. The Chargers might be a kind of brutal team this year. I was excited
A hard
to see
fantasy team, but it might be a better reality team. I'll just say that.
maybe. Now, in the 12th round, if you're waiting on your quarterback, you want to take one of these oldies, Matthew Stafford or Aaron Rodgers, two guys that are not going to rush at all, but they could throw 40 plus touchdowns. We've seen it many times in their careers, right? So Aaron Rodgers, I just don't see it happening for him. I'm getting cooler and cooler on him as we get closer to the season. And the last time we saw him play a full season, he was the quarterback 28 in fantasy points per game. He averages 14.1 points per game in 2022. He did finish as the quarterback 13 overall because it's just with the playing the games. But the efficiency wise was terrible for him. He had 0 games with 300 plus passing yards in 2022, just 1 game with 3 plus passing touchdowns. Coming off an Achilles at 40 years old, I'm completely off on him. With Matthew Stafford, though, we did see a really nice second half of the season for him. He wasn't scoring touchdowns. He was putting up a ton of passing yards to start the year, right? The first half, we are like, what is going on? Like, he just can't get into the end zone. Like, he's throwing so many yards, but the touchdowns aren't there. They started to come in the second half of the year. He threw 15 passing touchdowns over the last 6 games of the season, and only 9 the first 9 games of the season. From weeks 12 through 18, he was the quarterback 5 in fantasy points per game, averaging 20.3 fantasy points per game during that span. Finished as the quarterback 6, quarterback 8, quarterback 5, 16, and 9, and then another down one with 20. But some really good weeks in there. So if I'm taking a guy late and I just need to make sure he doesn't just kill me, Matthew Stafford, I think, could be really solid with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp as his 2 main targets.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers, I think everything has kind of dropped off, right? I think he was at a peak of, we like this guy, he's fun, he's smart, whatever, and everything went down. We liked him in fantasy, we liked him in reality as an MVP. Everything has come slowly tumbling down. Like literally with that Achilles injury, I think that was maybe the culmination of everything, right? Happening right away in week 1 early. So you can't go there. He's 40 years old. I don't have much inspiration for weapons on this team. And then you look at Matthew Stafford, like I've come around on him a little bit more this offseason, having a big rebound year. I thought, okay, maybe the Rams might look at drafting quarterback. Will they go after Michael Penix Jr.? None of that happened. They ended up with Jimmy Garoppolo to be the backup here. Stetson Bennett stinks, so he's not going to be anywhere near replacing Stafford anytime soon. So Stafford is still the man. And all you have to say is Puka and Cooper. That's it. He's got these guys. Those guys can put up big numbers together. So really the only difference between him and Jalen Hurts is he doesn't run. So he's not going to get any points that way, but he's got 2 elite receivers. I think they'll work more into the mix, other guys as well this year. We'll see about tight ends and all that. But I look at just Nacua and Kupp. And when both those guys were on the field together, Matthew Stafford was fantastic in the second half. So easy no-brainer to end the show for me. Stafford, now I'll throw out one more curveball to end the show here. Kirk Cousins versus both of these guys. Where do you stand? Because he's kind of in that same range as well as a veteran gunslinger.
I'm gonna go with Kirk Cousins. He's been a touchdown machine over the last few years. He has good weapons. He's in a good, well, we expect it to be a good system. I lean Kirk Cousins. I don't think he's going to be like a top 8 quarterback this year, but he should be around
Mhm.
quarterback 10. I think he's safer than Stafford or Rodgers.
Yeah, I agree with you. Cousins over Stafford for sure. And again, Cousins and Stafford are two very good targets in Superflex 2 QB leagues. I think they're fantastic. Like if you get kind of running quarterback as your one and you come back with one of these veterans, go there. Don't go with Rodgers.
Absolutely. That is it for today's show. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every day is Vinny and I will be back on Monday. And next week, we're going to go through all of our positional rankings to get you prepped for your fantasy drafts. You're definitely not going to want to miss those episodes. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye, y'all.